call the meeting to order. Please call the roll.
Toohill.
Here.
Esti. Flournoy.
Yes.
Rasmussen.
Yes.
Gandy.
Yes.
Ham.
Yes.
Council, is there any changes to the agenda? We do have one addition. We have put the Jefferson County Board of Supervisors on public appearances. It got missed last week. They did request, and that was an oversight, so you can see it down there. If nothing else, we'll go on to the consent agenda. Approval of the minutes of the June 12th, 2023 council meeting. Approval of the June 23rd, 2023 payroll in the amount of $148,627.64. Acceptance of the Volunteer Center meeting minutes. Acceptance of the Property Committee minutes from February 13th of 23 and March 31st of 23. Acceptance of the Personnel Committee minutes of June 12th, 23 and June 21st of 23. Acceptance of the Library Board minutes. Resolution authorizing fiscal year 24 tobacco permit holders. Resolution of fiscal year 24 salaries for city employees. Resolution of employment in the street department. Resolution of employment in the park and recreation department. Approval of general obligation debt in the amount of $1,154,889.50. This was for 3 notes. Pool, refinancing of previous notes, and some street paving on Court and Tyler. Approval of state revolving fund debt in the amount of $441,916.25. This is the last payment on the water plant. Resolution authorizing transfers. Approval of liquor license for the Walton Club. Approval of special claims for Visa in the amount of $11,964.58. And approval of total claims in the amount of $1,759,683.36. We had 3 claims more than $75,000. Boomerang Corporation for $806,947.26. That's step 3. Wicks Construction, $199,601.54, which was Highway 1, and Woodruff Construction for $538,575.79. That was also for step 3. So I would take a motion to approve the consent agenda.
Move to approve consent agenda.
Moved by Gandy,
Second.
second by Rasmussen. Any discussion?
Yes, Mayor, just one point. I don't make sure that, and I didn't see it, maybe I don't have the most current version. The June 12th Personnel Committee meeting minutes, I was, I attended that meeting. Okay, I don't have the most current notes that I'm
That's all
showing. Okay. But June, okay, for the clerk. That's the only change I have.
That you were present.
I was present at that meeting.
Okay.
Yeah.
You got that, Rebecca?
Mm-hmm.
Okay,
Yes.
great. Doug, you gonna weigh in?
Yeah, so I've reviewed all the claims, and I recommend to council that we pay the claims as presented.
Great, thank you. Any other questions, discussion? Seeing none, please call the roll.
Gandy.
Yes.
Rasmussen.
Yes.
Esti. Flournoy.
Yes.
Toohill.
Yes.
Ham.
Yes.
Okay, under public forum and appearances, Steve Beeman and Robert Kessel for the car show, Car Collectors Unlimited.
Yeah, you all know me and know why I'm here. I'm leaving this summer. I'm moving back to home in Minnesota. So I thought I'd bring Bert with me and let him see how this is done and how to work with you.
Okay,
We are asking for use of the square again this year. We realize our numbers have been down the last couple of years, so we have scaled back what we are asking for on the square. We are asking for the east, north, and west sides of the square with the intersections blocked off diagonally. It'd be east to, Broadway, east to north, and then in front of Iowa State Bank going north to east and north to west. I'm sorry. And then not taking any of the side streets at all.
Is that the change you're talking about in your memo?
Yes.
I'd move we approve those Street closure requests.
Is there a second?
Second.
Moved by Flournoy, second by Gandy. Any discussion or questions?
Are there specific hours? Sorry.
Yeah, do you need the date too on that? Yeah, it's the September 17th. It's on a Sunday. And the hours, we like to have probably 6 in the morning till 4 in the afternoon at least. We're hoping to be done well before that.
And no churches meeting on the square that day?
No, we've checked. That one's clear.
We've learned to work with the churches.
Yeah, the business, we'll talk to them too. So.
We've become friends over the years.
Good, good. Okay, so we do have a motion and a second, so all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same side. Okay, motion passed unanimously. Thank you, and good
Yeah,
luck.
thank you.
Hope you have a good show.
Thank you.
Thanks, Cam.
Next, we have Joey Katz about our new floor in the swimming pool. And Joey, just so you know, some of us did hear about this at the department head meeting. Calvin brought it to our attention last week that we do have an issue with the pool floor that was just installed. And what I know is he's working with the company. But why don't you go ahead and share what you know?
Well, yes, I've talked to him several times, and he has told me he's working with the company. And I feel that some other steps should be taken, that he is working with the franchise people. And I suggested I have you contacted the national organization that has franchised this local group. And he said no. And I felt that this was a mistake on his part because he indicated that this has never happened before to any other facility. So something went wrong, and I feel like it's no longer because the local people, or wherever they're from, the franchise that
Des
he
Moines.
used,
I think they're from Des Moines.
excuse me?
I think they're out of Des Moines.
The company that they're using that's out of Des Moines has been putting him off and putting him off. I know that they did come back one time, and they said, oh, we're going to come. I heard a rumor that they were going to come back in the fall. When you go into the lockers room, I haven't been in the men's locker room. I tried to get pictures of it, but I understand that it's much worse. Did you all? Yeah, you see, that gives a slight indication, that's just with my little old phone, of what the condition through the whole floor of the ladies' locker room is. And when I go in the morning, it smells bad, and I have been very worried about breathing the air in there, but you do need to use the locker room. And then I've been worried about all the kids taking swimming lessons, and Calvin said that, oh, we've put this and that, we power wash it, and it's only getting worse. So that's why I felt somebody above Calvin could say to him, other than me, that get in touch with the national franchise group. In general, the rec center, I think, is one of the crown jewels of Fairfield. And I think that it, in my opinion and other people's opinion, it needs more attention than it's getting from people who have some influence over how it's upkept. Now, I know it's been closed and now people are returning. And so I think it's a good time to put some attention on it. And this particular situation is just disgusting. It used to be disgusting because it was disgusting, but this is a new level of disgustingness that I know that they didn't anticipate, but I would encourage Calvin to, somebody needs to, pressure this company, because I would think that they've been paid. And they have no motivation at this point to do anything about it.
Yeah, I would think there's some kind of guarantee, but I don't know that
Yeah, well,
for sure. So, we can look in, we can work with Calvin.
Okay.
Try to
What
take
is this
some more
showing
steps.
us exactly?
Oh, this is the
Is
floor.
that corrosion,
No.
mold, filth? What is it?
It's completely hard to tell. I guess it's mold. I
Or
don't
it's
know.
stain, we don't, I mean, Calvin
What's- it's
explained it
not
as
stained.
stain.
It's stained, but from what?
What do you think?
It's
Doug?
just
Okay,
appeared.
I go there 3 times a week. to
Do you go
swim.
in the locker room?
Yeah. And I know Councilman Gandy also frequents the locker room. So what it looks like is when you walk in, all the traveled paths where people stand to take showers, for example, are all darkened like this, to one extreme or another. So you might think it's just dirt off people's feet and shoes, but it might be just something that's happening to the material that we're standing on, that's where the pressure is applied. You know, maybe water's coming up through the flooring that's already been put down, they didn't seal it properly. He and I don't think it's mold because when he power washes it, it doesn't come off necessarily. Some of it does, some of it doesn't, so.
I think that is what Calvin explained to me is, oh, we've washed it and we don't know what to do. And like, okay, well, you need to get some information from the national organization, particularly since he indicated to me that they checked it all out and this flooring has been used in other rec centers, in other locker rooms, in other swimming pools, and you're going,
Right, it
We're
doesn't
the only
seem
one?
like the property,
Right.
it seems like it's a discoloration. I don't think it's mold, but a problem is it doesn't ever dry. So it stays moist. And so it could be the beginning of mold, but it doesn't ever, my experience in using the facilities, the rec center, and I agree it is a crown jewel of Fairfield, but the locker room now, I think the idea was this was supposed to be an upgrade from the current flooring, the past flooring.
yes, right,
But it
right.
doesn't seem to be. It gives off, it seems to get off a fairly offensive odor, and it always stays wet, which is, at least in the men's locker room, it always seems to stay wet, which is a
Well-
problem.
It might be that this particular flooring is retaining moisture to a greater extent than was retained prior.
Yeah, it doesn't seem,
Could be
as you said,
installed.
I don't think it's sealed. The moisture goes beneath the surface. I mean, it's like something similar to a sponge, like a thin layer of sponge.
Well,
And
So-
the sponge, the water goes beneath the
Okay,
surface.
so we have 5 minutes into this, we're not gonna solve it here.
I agree.
right,
tonight,
but I would just
so
like to
let's
add
take
the
a step further with
sorry.
Calvin.
Yeah, I just can't imagine this hasn't happened before somewhere.
Yeah.
And someone should know what it is as soon as you describe it. And maybe you need to go to the next level of experience at the next higher level.
And that's not the situation in the ladies' locker room, because in the ladies' locker room, you have the whole showers, and people don't go from the showers dripping wet or with wet bathing suits. They're usually pretty dry when they go into the locker room. And it's in the locker room that it's the most disgusting and continuously, not every single spot, as you can see, which is also interesting. And in my opinion, it's not really wet in there. In the locker room part, in the shower part, it's more wet. And I suggested to them, open the doors. When you open the main door at 6 o'clock, open the doors. Or leave the door open at night. If it's a problem of air circulation, is that a solution? But that hasn't happened at all. So if it is just moisture, open the doors at night. Which,
Thanks for your suggestions,
Okay.
Joey. We'll look into it a little bit further and see if we can.
so
I
my
didn't
other,
realize it was a franchise either, so.
pardon me?
I said I didn't realize it was a franchise kind of situation where there's,
That's what he said to me.
okay, so
And
we'll check
one
that
other
out.
thing is, when you check it out, or could he put a post, because everyone in the ladies' locker room, everyone talks about it, and they're disgusted, and has said anything to him. Could he put a note up? Say, we are not only, we wash it once in a while, but these are the steps that we have taken, and we have contacted them or something, because,
Great. That's a good
otherwise-
idea. We need to communicate with the public.
yes.
Great.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Joey. Okay, next up is Jefferson County Board of Supervisors on the ambulance service. Looks like Lee's coming up.
Hey, this is Brian Thomas, our Director of Operations for our ambulance service, putting everything together, trying to make it work. And then the supervisors throw monkey wrenches into things just for GP. I want to thank the council for allowing us the opportunity to speak, and in particular for Tom and the phone call that we had. Was a very good conversation with Tom, and we started out by, if I remember correctly, Tom, the figure was 22 million. We asked for a specific number, so, and then we'd work down
You talked to
from
somebody
there.
else, I think. That wasn't me.
Anyway, I don't, I'm not sure that I'm comfortable, I guess you'd say, with giving a specific figure, because you all know what your budgets are and what you can or can't do. And so what I'm here to do today is to talk to you about any contribution that the city would like to contribute to the startup cost of the ambulance. So I'm going to give you some dollar figures here. So we estimate the renovation of the building at $430,000. The new ambulance that we have contracted to purchase is $260,803, and that fluctuated a little bit. I think we're talking about changing the material on the seats. Very grateful for the city, and this is a round figure, but very grateful to the city for their $75,000 that they're contributing towards the purchase of that ambulance. That's phenomenal. We've got equipment and supplies that total somewhere around $200,000, $250,000. We've applied for a grant. I shouldn't say we. Brian has applied for a grant with the Greater Jefferson County Foundation for some heart monitors. We keep our fingers crossed on that one. There's a lot of other costs, office equipment, utilities, things, the medical director wages that will ultimately go down, but for the first 4 months, they're a little higher than what they will be annually. So the county has set aside the remainder of their ARPA funds, which is $1,021,803. We budgeted an additional $245,000, and we have $80,000 remaining in CARES money that we have appropriated directly and or indirectly to the ambulance service.
Excuse me, I should just make sure that you appropriated all of your CARES money?
Not
ARPA
all
money?
of it, the remaining $1 million.
Okay, okay.
Yeah, no, we have two, how do I want to say this, Paul? We have some funds that are committed but have yet to be expended. So, for example, we entered into an agreement with NATEL for $775,000 for broadband out in the county. We've appropriated $500,000 to that. There's certain criteria steps that they have to meet to qualify for the remaining. We received a grant from tourism grant. Now I can't think of, I apologize, I can't think of something in Iowa. Anyway, so we're contributing $440,000 of ARPA funds to the expansion of the county park, new sites and things that will go up on the Holmes properties. And there's other funds that we put $400,000 towards the daycare center. But our remaining $1 million, a little over $1 million, we're contributing or earmarking specifically for the ambulance. So we expect to be able to start generating revenue immediately, beginning October 1st. We are going to enter into an agreement with a third-party billing company yet to be determined. I think we have a pretty good idea who that's going to be. And they will do what's called credentialing. We have to get credentials for insurance, Medicare, Medicaid, all of that stuff. They will do all that credentialing for us, and which will allow us then to enter into contractual agreements with those entities. Brian has been working with GEMT, which is Ground Emergency Medical Transport. That helps us recoup additional dollars for Medicaid transfers and other services provided, because the state and the feds recognize that there is a low reimbursement. So there is a process by which we can go through annually and submit a cost report, and then they'll not reimburse, but they will provide additional funding for those Medicaid services that we provided. One of the things I wanted to point out, and this is just more for your reference than anything else, just so you know, as you all remember, or I'm sure that you've been apprised from John and Elizabeth and Tom, and this is not an indictment of anybody, so please don't misunderstand, but CARE had suggested or stated that for them to remain a viable service in Jefferson County, that they would need $1.5 million a year. Of course, they're a profit-based entity, and profit's not a dirty word, so to meet their expenses and other obligations, they, like I say, indicated $1.5 million a year. If we deduct and these are round figures, but if we deduct the $270,000 that the hospital generates through their ambulance levy, that leaves a remainder of about $1,275,000, I think. And if we had remained with them, we would have split that amount 3 ways, which would be an additional $375,000 a year per entity, plus the $35,000 that we each already contribute, bringing the total to $410,000 a year. That we would have to, as the governmental entities and with the contractual agreement, would have to increase our budgets to pick up. By the county taking over the ambulance service, that point becomes moot. The $410,000, both for the city and for JCHC, will not impact yours or their budget, because we will assume all of the operating costs for that. So what I'm here simply to ask for tonight is for the city council, if they see their way clear, and that you all feel that there is some funds that you can contribute to the startup cost of the ambulance, any number that you come up with would be greatly appreciated. And I will, I guess, entertain at this point any questions that you may have. I've thrown out a lot of numbers. I don't know if you all have considered a specific amount.
No, I think the committee did meet.
Oh, I thought you were.
And I did communicate with Susie that, and chime in here, Ways and Means, or at this time, unless there's been a change, we felt like we have a lot of unknowns and we were not ready to contribute beyond what was planned at this point. So do you want to add to that, Doug?
No, that's the committee's position. We didn't take any action. The letter we got from Susie Drish didn't have a specific dollar amount in it.
No, it did not.
And so we had already committed to the ambulance earlier this year, and we did not feel comfortable making a decision to make any further contribution. According to the city engineer, we have quite a few outstanding obligations already that she thought were also appropriate use of those funds, the ARPA funds that we're talking about here. So we didn't take any action. We probably need more information from her in regard to what she's thinking. She did mention the fire station, of course, as an obligation that we're going to need money for.
Yep, I completely understand. Like I said, the conversation I had with Tom, we had not specifically come before the city council, and so upon his recommendation, we took that step, to have the conversation. If, like I say, if in the future something comes up, you win the lottery.
Well, we are transferring ownership of the ambulance. That's under consideration for tonight's meeting.
I'm sorry.
Aren't we transferring ownership of the ambulance to the county tonight? That's one of the topics of consideration.
The current ambulances, the two current ambulances that the
So what's in it?
2080, that the 2080 owns,
You know, we're gonna,
will get transferred.
what's the net
is on
value of
top
that
it.
transfer?
Yeah. I don't know what used ambulances are valued at.
Well, the total cost of the two ambulances combined was $285,000, of which each entity contributed about $85,000. And the one ambulance is a 2016, so it's 7 years old. The other one is a 2020. It was purchased, it was a brand new rig when we purchased that. I was on the ambulance board at that time. So,
Haley, may I suggest that you write down all this stuff on an actual piece of paper? Give us the numbers so that we can have them in hand. And again, the committee can look at it as they meet. And, you know, if there's an opportunity that they feel that they can contribute and they feel like they can, that, you know, it's there. But to have it written is helpful.
and I'll do anything, yeah, I'll do anything you want. I'm not sure exactly, you talk about the money that we've,
I think put the whole,
numbers
but,
are-
you know, put your whole budget together, what,
Okay.
you know, what kind of what you explained here, so that they can
Right.
have it in writing. And, you know, they got it in their back pocket and they know that it's a need. And, you know, lots of needs to go around right now.
I'm going to ask
So-
you an
The
unfair
only other
question, too.
question-
sure,
I mean, number
he
one,
answers unfair questions.
we need to make sure this works, number one. I mean,
Sure.
it's a.
The
it's
other
not-
question
It's a
that
need.
I
but-
have had a number of people asking, and what is the reason that the current facility it's not going to be used? In other words, and you are investing obviously considerable in your redoing the bank building. I mean, why is it not, I mean, when that other facility has, you know, I guess I would just say the adequate storage, et cetera, and a place for people to be, what's going to happen to that, people are asking?
Well, first off, it's privately owned, and he wants $500,000. And,
Kara owns that building, we don't.
right, that's not ours. We have no jurisdiction in that building. And there is quite a bit of mold problems and stuff in that building. And so the reality of it was, as we looked at that, and.
That's a reasonable question. If mold, why would they want $500,000 for it?
Paul, I can't go there,
I know,
okay?
that's sort of.
I have no
Yeah.
idea.
I think the whole thing is, it is privately owned
Right.
and they've got really a less expensive option renovating this
And
building.
Melanie was phenomenal in providing to me the assessments that you all did on the locations for the fire department. And so we did look at several options, not the least of which was the old fire station. Part of the problem there was the cost to renovate to a certain extent in some areas. And because we had to do some renovation, required us to bring it up to ADA standards, plus the time that we could actually access the property to start that was so far outside our October 1st deadline that it wasn't feasible. We looked at the land behind O'Reilly's that we own, but the cost there was more, it cost more there than to do what we are doing, and we own that building out there. Now, we can have the conversation of whether or not the county should have ever purchased the building, but that's water under the bridge now. And so taking advantage of the fact that we owned it, we decided that that was our best option, was to move forward there. And again, Martha, it is a privately owned building, and he has indicated on more than one occasion that he wants $500,000. Now, I would not suggest or sit here or stand here and tell you that that's a hard, fast number. I'm sure it's probably a starting point, but,
Right.
you know.
I think he kind of took the impression, too, he had the county over a barrel, and they needed that property. So he thought he could ask whatever he wanted. But that didn't turn out to be the case, so.
And the ambulance bays that were built there they're very well done, and they're actually, the houses, I mean, to coin the phrase that you used, is adequate, but I'm not sure that it's necessarily what we're looking for. So in the grand scheme of things, utilizing an entity that we'd already invested money in. And the other thing that we will be doing, wherever possible, is all of the work that will be done out there on 1900 West Burlington will be with local talent. You know, anybody that, if all the jobs can be bid and done here, that's what we intend to do, is use local talent. Schaus Voorhees will be managing the construction on the property.
I think the other big
Yes.
advantage too of that building is you reduced your call time
Yes.
from being far south of town. You know, there's incidents north of town. You know, it's same with the fire station, that we had to find something fairly centrally located, and I think they have that advantage there in the new building.
And it will be, for whatever it's worth, it will be pull-through bays, so we'll come off 20th Street into the old Walmart parking lot, loop around, and then go back out onto 20th from the drive.
Just for clarification, will the hospital be levying money to support the ambulance service in the future?
For 2 years.
And that levy will disappear?
What I will tell you is that currently, yes, but we're hoping to be able to facilitate a continuation of that. There is some dynamics, shall we say, at play, but there isn't anything etched in stone other than, and I want to thank John for that, because initially the hospital was thinking a year, and John indicated at the last ambulance board meeting that I attended that he thought that it should go out at least 2. And so we do have that, and I provided some information with Brian. He's been talking with Chauncey and Elizabeth and
Right.
Vanessa, so we're trying.
So now something controversial.
Uh,
So now bring up something controversial.
Yeah. So
Has emergency management been talked to about the commission?
About-
They can probably levy for the ambulance service as well, couldn't they?
Oh, I suppose that they could. As far as we can levy, the county can levy. We can do what's called an emergency services levy up to 75
Would that be
cents.
enough to cover the cost?
Oh, yeah, and the reality of it is that we don't need that much. But my thought process on this is, and it's just my thought process, but my thought process is on this that the levy, by the way, at the hospital is 27 cents. That's the max that they can levy, and they are at the 27 cents. What we currently have in place is it's a pass-through. It cannot be used for their operation, for their operating budget. It's just strictly a pass-through. By law, it has to be used for ambulance service. So they'll either we can facilitate some kind of arrangement to continue it, or they'll have to eliminate it. My thought process is that it's already in place. The taxpayers are already experiencing the fact that it's in place. Anything new that the county would do would require us taking it out to the voters. The time frame of being able to accomplish all of that, it just seemed to me, in sitting down and thinking about it, that it made sense in light of the fact that we're saving the hospital $400,000 a year, that a continuation of that levy, which has no cost to the hospital other than having to administer it. So, I'm hoping that we can facilitate that, but again, thanks to John, we
Well,
do have 2 years.
The other advantage there is that it's a countywide levy. It's not
Yes, sir.
specific to one entity or another.
Right.
The same thing with the emergency management.
And we looked at our sales tax as a possibility at some point in the future. Currently, our use is 80% property tax relief and 20% bridge and culverts. So we would have to go in and ask the voters again, which you all, you know how that works. And at this point, I'm just keeping my fingers crossed that through conversations that Brian and Chauncey and Elizabeth and Vanessa are having, that, this might be something that we can put together, because it'll also help the hospital. This way, I know Tom and Elizabeth are well aware of, Paul too, for that matter. The hospital had a contract with CARE to provide transfers. And part of that contract was the hospital had to pay for those transfers that couldn't pay. The other thing that the hospital has been experiencing here of late is an increase in their costs of operation because they're having to pay all of these other entities to transfer our patients because our current contractor is not transferring patients. So they mentioned in the last board meeting that they are absorbing all of those costs. So what we're suggesting is that we're going to save them money in that regard because we'll do all their transfers. We won't charge for the patients that don't have the funds to pay. And there would have to be no separate agreement per se. And it would just all, if we can leave the levy in place, and it would save us some money too because we wouldn't have to hold a special election or any of the rest of it. But right now, that's just a conversation.
Yeah. So the upshot is, Lee, if you get us the numbers that you spoke about tonight, so we have them on hand.
Sure.
Okay?
I will do
Great.
that. I appreciate
Thank
it. By the way, mark your calendars, July 15th, 4 to 7 p.m. The Mazdam Barns for the appreciation picnic for the first responders and all our law enforcement, fire department, pork producers, cattlemen's association providing free food. And apparently, if we are successful in locating one, there will be a dunk tank. So you can dunk the soup in the soup. It's basically, you can take that for whatever it's worth. Brian's gonna be sitting there, and so's Tom. Tom's agreed to sit in there. Yes, sir.
Question, Lee. Let's say the hospital kept the levy for longer. It's still only 27 cents and it isn't gonna
Right.
meet your need. Do you have a threshold before you have to put your thing out to the voters?
You mean as far as the dollar amount
Can
goes?
you levy some for emergency services without having to have a vote on it?
No.
It's-
No, I mean,
it's
let me
from
rephrase that.
$0.
Let me rephrase that. We can increase our general basic levy as far as that part of it goes and not have to go before the voters, but I don't believe that we'll have to increase anything if the 27 cents stays in place. And we could move the other direction if we had to with the 27 cents. So it would, what's what I'm looking for? It would be, shall we say, revenue neutral, and it wouldn't impact the property taxpayers any more than it already is, except you have to go back out. We would have to ask the voters to do a special levy. If we can keep that in place with what our expected revenue is, with the additional funds we would generate through GEMT, we believe, and we currently have in our budget set aside, or we budgeted $245,000. We would leave that number probably in place on a continual basis, and our ambulance will be able to function. And we figured all our wages and benefits and everything at the absolute highest level that they could possibly come in at, but we know that not everybody's going to come in at that level. There's certain criteria that have to be met in terms of years and certifications and so on and so forth. But we figured everything on the high end, and everybody sitting in this room knows that you can plan and there's going to be hiccups in your plans and you have to adjust accordingly. But very comfortable with moving forward. I'm not really concerned about the financial end of it as far as being able to operate. The initial startup costs is the big deal, but once we start rolling on October 1st, then we start generating revenue. That alleviates some of it. And again, if we're successful, and very grateful to John about getting that, we know we've got 2 years of that. And we may be able to facilitate an agreement to keep it going.
Great. Thank you.
Okay.
Thanks, Lee.
I appreciate
We'll look forward
everything.
to seeing your numbers.
Thank you.
Yep, thank you, I appreciate it. This echo behind me here. Thanks, guys.
Yep. Okay, we will move on to resolution, action items, and ordinances. The first action item is a consideration of a 2080 agreement for the use of the public library building, Portland, Washington, and Indian Hills Community College, and Melanie's gonna explain and talk us through this.
Okay, so what is attached to your agenda is the revised agreement for Indian Hills. So Indian Hills leases a portion of the Carnegie Museum building, and that agreement is up for renewal, revision every 5 years. And so I worked on that over the last couple months. What I just handed out to you was a summary of the changes, so I'll go through them real quickly. And I believe Property Committee has reviewed all these changes as well. So one of the big changes, and then that kind of facilitated some of the other changes related to percent of cost, is that Carnegie Museum is now occupying a larger portion of the ground level. Before it was a joint, that both entities were occupying the 3,300 square feet lower level, with the bathrooms and the elevators also being joint. But what we would move towards is that the 3,300 square feet would be city, with the bathrooms and the elevators still being joint. And then the mezzanine, which people tell me that's where the children's books used to be in the library, but it's above one of the classrooms. And again, that used to be primarily where Indian Hills held a lot of their records, as they have less records on site, and Carnegie has more things that they're stockpiling and keeping track of. We do have a higher portion of that being the cities. So with the increase in square footages that would change in this contract, there would be some changes in cost share. Indian Hills was originally requesting 33.66% share on everything, and so some of those we did change. But so the first thing that we'll see is in Article 4, Paragraph 1, that Indian Hills does take care of maintenance when they have classes on Monday through Thursday, but with Carnegie having more weekend events, that Indian Hills requested we take care of the custodial services on those, which we agreed to. We do have a paragraph in there that Indian Hills does still pay for all of the dumpster cost on that, but that Carnegie would take care, or the city would take care of custodial services when we have special events. Paragraph 2, we were doing a 50-50 split of maintenance cost, with Indian Hills providing preventative maintenance to the HVAC equipment, because of the splitting of the spaces. This becomes 33% Indian Hills, 66% City of Fairfield, which is acceptable. The maintenance that Indian Hills provide has been useful in just preventative maintenance checkups. I think they had a slight coolant leak that they were able to fix to get us through the season until a larger repair could be made. Paragraph 3, changing the percent of major repairs from 50-50 to 33% 66. And then paragraph 8, leaving the percent of the elevator cost share at 75%, 25%, but noting that Fairfield pays 100% of the preventative maintenance. There was some discussion that Indian Hills could pay for the preventative maintenance, and so where we negotiated on that was that we would keep it 75-25, but that we would pay for the preventative maintenance and the annual inspection, which we currently do. And there's not, because we've just done so much upgrades to the elevators, there is not a lot of preventative maintenance in the next 5 years at this building. In Article 5, Indian Hills was requesting a 33.66 on the utilities. When I calculated up their actual hours of operation versus our hours of operation, and then included the square foot area that we occupied, it came to about like a 49 to 51% split. We do pay, or I should say not pay, for the water and sewer. So Indian Hills agreed to split the electrical bill 50-50, even though that they occupy 33% of the building. And then the last change is a footnote or a note in the very last paragraph. So in this, we had a great meeting with myself and representatives from Indian Hills. Jake had an opportunity to show the representatives from Indian Hills around and how much we've expanded, and they loved to see what they were doing. But obviously Indian Hills got concerned about whether that there was going to be a future for them in the building. And so that is something that as a city and a community that we need to keep discussion about if the Carnegie Museum does continue to expand, to make sure that we have a place for Indian Hills. And, you know, obviously I assured Indian Hills that we want them in the community and that we'll work with them if that would happen. And so what Indian Hills requested being added to this agreement is that they would have a minimum of 1 full academic year notice that we would terminate the lease, so that they would have an opportunity to find a place. And obviously, if we were going to do that, we would probably help them find a place, again, because we want them to stay in Fairfield, but we did add that language to this. So with these changes that are in what is on your agenda, I would recommend approval of this agreement to move forward for another 5 years.
When does this go into effect?
July 1, actually, if you
It'd be
move
in effect
forward.
until June 30, 28?
Yes.
And did we anticipate this in our budgeting?
I believe so. I know that, so the main thing that's changing, I mean, there are a few maintenance things, but those costs, we don't have any major capital items outside of the really big projects. And so it would be the electrical bill that would be the only thing that, if we did not identify, that would be the only thing that would not be in the budget. And I guess I don't know from discussing with Carnegie what they would have had in their budget.
Carnegie got an increase of what, $28,000 this year or something, Doug?
Yeah, they did have an increase in their,
I don't know that it
Oh, I
was
don't
necessarily
recall
for these
offhand.
percentages,
Yeah.
but
Yeah,
it
they
was
did
for
get an
engineering.
increase.
So I'd make a motion to approve this 2080 agreement with Indian Hills.
Okay, is there a second? Second by SD. Any other discussion? No, please call the roll.
Flournoy.
Yes.
Esti. Toohill.
Yes.
Gandy.
Yes.
Ham. Yes. Rasmussen.
Yes.
Next action item, consideration of authorizing ambulance service, 28E, to transfer vehicle ownership of Jefferson County Ambulance Service at the appropriate time. Tom, you gonna talk about this?
What this is, the 2080 owns the 2 current ambulances at CARE, at CARE right now, and CARE owns the 3rd one themselves. So when CARE pulls out, the county will purchase a new ambulance. We've already talked about or agreed to on our commitment on that part of it. But the 2 ambulances that the 2080 owns were, I guess the request is that the city turns over their share of the 2080 agreement to county for operation of those 2 ambulances. And the reason it's stated at appropriate time is those ambulances are contracted to CARE until midnight, the 30th, and then the ambulance service will turn over to the county at the next minute. So one of those ambulances, at least one of them, hopefully, CARE will turn over to the county prior to that, because there won't be any supplies or anything in it. And the county will have to have at least one up and running and ready to go when the contract flips over at midnight. So we're not exactly sure when that's going to be, but that's why it's stated at appropriate time, as to whenever we can get whenever the county can get an agreement with CARE to take ownership of probably the 7-year-old ambulance, I'm guessing.
Is there any need in such a transfer for any numbers or calculations, like valuation of the ambulances at time of transfer?
Will we need those, you asked?
Yeah.
I don't know, because, I mean, it's the 2080 that actually owns it. John, what I guess what's required on our end to know, to do
Well,
this
the
before?
28E is gonna do the actual title sign-offs, in my impression, but
Yes.
we'll want a resolution from each of our member bodies in the 28E saying it's okay to do that,
Has the
because it's an
hospital,
asset.
The
that we're
hospital's
giving
already
them.
agreed to it.
hospital's already acted on this?
Yes.
The only reason for the valuation, I asked that earlier, was that's a contribution the city's making to startup
Yeah.
costs to the county.
Yeah, I think
So
you're
we are
quite well
contributing to
taken.
the startup costs
Yeah.
that way.
Yeah.
Yep.
So when do you want this resolution, John?
I'd say September, frankly. I mean, unless I'm missing something, I don't think the ambulance startup is ready to roll in August. We could be doing the title transfers, second meeting in August, and I think
Okay.
by then, this process that he's talking about as far as being credentialized, that's gonna take probably weeks with people in Des Moines.
So should the motion be at the termination of the current contract, ownership will transfer to the county?
Prior to the termination of the
Yeah.
current
They're
contract.
gonna need to take ownership of probably one of them, at least prior to the termination of the contract.
When you said the 30th, you mean September 30th, or?
Yes. Right, because October 1st at midnight, well,
Yeah,
midnight,
That's in the
September
contract.
30th, yeah, it rolls over. So if the county doesn't take possession of at least one ambulance prior to that point, they won't be ready to roll out at midnight.
But that's when the contract terminates, right?
I know. So they're trying to get possession of, that's why it's appropriate time. They're trying to get possession of the third ambulance from CARE prior to that, so they can have it stocked and ready to go at midnight when they take possession of the other two, and then they'll have those up and running as fast as possible.
So should there be any language regarding valuation in the resolution?
I mean, we're gonna need the valuation anyway, so I don't know if it hurts to put it in the resolution or not. I don't know if it makes any difference. We might as well put it in there. But if it's under our,
And how is
Call
it
it
going,
any
and
time.
how is it going to be determined, I guess, is also a question.
Who values ambulances?
So the only purpose, though, of valuing the ambulance is to calculate how much value we're giving towards the ambulance service in the county? To be clear, okay.
I think so.
because the ambulances are owned by a public entity, my impression would be the book values what we put into them when the public entity bought them. They don't depreciate the same way they do if you're a private entity and you want to write them off for tax purposes.
That includes all the contents as well, right?
Yeah, yeah.
but there won't,
They're not all owned by the 2080.
two of them, the two older ones are, well, two of them are owned by the 2080, one's owned by CARE.
Sorry, I meant
Right,
not all the contents in the ambulance.
None of the contents is owned by the 2080 except two of this, or one of the stretchers, I think. Not two, one of the stretchers in the two ambulances is owned by the 2080. And none of the contents is owned by the 2080.
We could authorize the 2080 to transfer contingent upon, like, the valuation of the ambulances
At time of transfer?
at time of transfer. Just giving us notice of it, just so that we know.
Yeah, we're just authorizing 28E to take action. We're not gonna take action ourselves.
Right,
Right.
We
that's
don't own
what
the-
I said.
We don't own the ambulances.
If we
Right.
can- Yep.
So the
Exactly.
motion is just to authorize 28E board to transfer the ambulances as they seem deemed necessary.
And we have a member on the board, so we're confident that our
We have
interests will be
representation.
protected.
And just make it effective to the time of transition from private to public. That's gonna be sometime in the last 2 weeks of September as far as some of that stuff that
Well, I just said it
Lee
as
says
they,
they gotta do. So, yeah, I agree.
as they think necessary.
I agree with your motion, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so we have a motion on the floor. Is there a second? Second by Gandy. Further discussion? Now please call the roll.
Flournoy,
Yes.
Gandy,
Yes.
Ham,
Yes.
Esti,
Yes.
Rasmussen,
Yes.
Toohill.
Yes.
Thank you. I forgot to mention at the very beginning of the meeting that we were striking this next action item, so my error, but we're not gonna do that. So, next is consideration on the matter of annexation of Walton Park addition adjacent to Prairie Lakes And before we get started on this, I'm going to open a public hearing because that's what this is right now. So does someone want to, I think we do have someone who wants to speak on this issue. So go ahead and come up to the podium and give us your name and what ward you live in, please. And if you can stick your comments to a couple minutes, I'd appreciate it.
My name is Keith Vladimir, and what ward I live in, I have no clue, but I live at 209 East Grimes. I'm not here to protest or anything about the annexation. It's just a couple things about the resolution and what the resolution says. It, describes it as a Walton Park addition to this city of Fairfield. And normally when the designation says an addition, that means it's coming in, it's a subdivision. And I could not find any information on a subdivision for this parcel. So, and it also refers to an exception to Lot 1 of Prairie Oak subdivision, an unrecorded plat attached here too. Prairie Oak subdivision does not exist, so you can't exclude anything that doesn't, you can't include anything that doesn't exist, or exclude it because it just doesn't exist. And the word plat, which is the word plat, which is in the exclusion, infers that there's a boundary survey, and I couldn't find a boundary survey of that piece. And the permanent index number is for the tract as a whole, so it won't fit the description as on the resolution. And I haven't seen a map showing the annexation area. And that is basically my whole comment on that.
It says here the plat is not recorded. Is that why you couldn't find it?
The plat is not an official plat, it's just a preliminary plat according to a preliminary, or another description I saw, see. So, it just,
Right, it's not recorded. It's,
Where'd we get our description, do you know, Melanie?
From the applicant.
I was going to say, Melanie, do you have any
Why,
comments? And
You're right.
His
You're right
comments?
about that, Keith.
so, I mean, it's, I can't, it's not, it says it's unofficial plat, but that could mean a preliminary plat, and preliminary plat has not been approved by anybody. I could not find a
should we table this?
subdivision
And,
plat that makes it illegal.
should we table this until we get it cleaned up?
seems like it. John, can you give us some direction
Yeah,
here?
my impression is you need a better description of what the accepted area is from that 30 acres. Do you agree, Melanie?
Yeah, I'm not a very good
I'm not an
reader.
engineer, but I've read a lot of
Sorry,
descriptions.
Melanie.
No. I was gonna make Rebecca talk because she's the one who taught me how to do this part of my job. So we require the applicant to provide us with the description because we're not lawyers or land surveyors. And so if it's incorrect, that would be on the applicant. And he has a point that I guess we can't accept an illegal description, but I'm not I don't want to be pointing fingers, but I'm also like, I'm not 100% sure it's the staff's job to make sure that we have a legal description. So I'm not, I'm not sure what the process is. I mean, normally we would pass these things and then they would take it to the recorder and the recorder would throw it back at them and tell them it's wrong. I guess we just caught
Actually,
it.
it would be the auditor that throws it
Or the
back out.
auditor,
Yeah.
exactly. So I'm not 100%. I mean, I can tell you exactly what's being done, but that is, the description we get from the applicant.
So all past annexations are okay because the auditor has checked them.
Well, they check them before they,
Except.
Before they'll put them on the plat book, they
Right.
check them very thoroughly.
yeah.
And then it gets computed in the GIS. But what we might do here is table this and tell our owner that they need to come back with a better description. They could fix the description by looking at what that unrecorded plat preliminarily showed, and it's probably got a lot dimension, like maybe
It's gotta meet some-
70 by
it's gotta
120
meet
or
some
something
bounds.
like that, which is an accepted
Yeah.
description. And that would fix this if their engineer can help them with that.
I make the motion to table this resolution
Is,
then.
just one question real quick
Surveyor,
there.
right.
Okay, let me close the public hearing first, but
Oh,
go
I'm
ahead,
sorry.
Tom.
Is the parcel ID number that's listed there, is that where it says Phase 2 also accepting Lot 1 Prairie Oak subdivision and unrecorded plat attached here to parcel ID number 0730100020? Is that the actual parcel, is the parcel ID, does that have the actual lot description,
That's the current,
the plat?
for the current tract.
Yeah, that would be what the assessor, the treasurer, and the auditor assign as a parcel ID number for something that could either be inside the city or outside the city. It doesn't mean that it's necessarily an approved subdivision, but that's what they're calling it right now, because that's all they've got to go on, and they're still gonna tax it no matter what they call it.
So the parcel ID is the whole subdivision, not that one specific Lot 1 of Prairie Oaks?
For each individual, it could be a lot in
Well,
town.
So, yeah, correct.
I took that to mean it was the accepted lot parcel ID number, and that might be another answer for the owner, is to go figure out what they've got in the various offices backing that parcel ID number, even though it's not part of the city yet.
Yes, so the parcel ID number that's listed is the whole, parcel. The part that is being accepted is another parcel that, is a driveway to, a rear of a property that's behind this area. I guess my question though then, John, is I did not, and because this has come up with a lot of people who've had concerns regarding the requirement for it to be subdivided in order for it to be brought in.
Just the opposite.
Okay,
A lot of times it needs to be in addition to the city before it's subdivided. You can have innumerable subdivisions of an addition, but you don't have that many additions of a subdivision usually. So that's the way I see it
Yeah.
usually. We've got additions in town that have multiple subdivisions all over our concentrated city map, old plat, new plat, et cetera, all the way out to where the new subdivisions are on the west side of town. And they all come in as additions, and then there's subdivisions of a part of an addition.
right, and that's what I thought, I mean, because sometimes we get mixed up that they'll try and use, or they'll want the addition name to be the same as the subdivision name, and that has caused some confusions in the past as well. So, actually, this is easier for us when it comes in as one big chunk and then we subdivide it at a later process.
Yeah,
That's what I thought, so.
It makes more sense if you just say that, well, the reason that you want it annexed and an addition is because we don't have any jurisdiction to subdivide anything.
Yeah.
Except for that 1-2 mile outreach where we approve subdivisions just by either saying we'd like to be able to consider it as far as future usefulness to the city, the possible servicing of the city if it continues to grow out in that direction. We have that for our 2 mile urbanized area. We don't have, we have extraterritorial subdivision jurisdiction, but we don't have extraterritorial zoning jurisdiction yet.
Right.
So it's a little
Yeah.
confusing.
Yep, yeah, okay.
Okay, so is anybody else want to speak on this? If not, I'm going to close the public hearing. And now we have the resolution, which is consideration of annexation of Walton Park additions adjacent to Prairie Lakes. So now if you want to make a motion to
All
table
right, I'll
that.
make the motion to table this resolution.
Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Two Hill.
The table for what purpose?
Until
get a
lot
better
description.
To
description.
consider later, when they can clean it up.
Yes, I got that part. To consider what?
So
Do
they
what?
can clean up the description of the property so we
Alright.
can
Yeah.
All right, thank you,
annex what we know we're annexing, I guess.
thank you.
Okay, any other questions? If not, please call the roll for the table.
Flournoy,
Yes.
Toohill,
Yes.
Esti,
Yes.
Rasmussen,
Yes.
Ham,
Yes.
Gandy,
Yes,
Great, thank you. And Melanie, are you gonna communicate with them? Okay, great, thank you. Next is a public hearing, consideration on the matter of a proposed franchise agreement with ITC Midwest LLC. Is there anyone here that wants to speak to that public hearing? Yes, go ahead.
Thank you very much, Mayor and Council. Oh, sorry, okay. To discuss the city branch, or the electric franchise with ITC Midwest. My name is Scott Arnold. I'm the Community Relations Manager, and the city of Fairfield is in my service area. For some of you that may or may not know about who ITC is, we purchased the electric transmission system from Alliant Energy back in 2007. This consists of the high voltage 69,000 volts up to 345,000 volt transmission poles, substations, and roughly 6,700 miles throughout Iowa, southern Minnesota. For Fairfield, it's 69,000 volt is what we're talking about, so within the city limits. Because when I say 345, then that gets usually.
where's that located?
Was that a question up
Yes,
here?
here. Where is
Okay,
that located?
That is kind of.
Oh, sorry.
It sounds like it's coming from back here. Yes.
Oh.
Thank you. So along Highway 34, Old 34, and then we have a substation just south of Subway. So that's
Right.
substation right there. And then there's other lines that run through alleys in town here. So.
Are those the trunk hunting big wires that are going down the business district alleys? Do you know?
Down the district area, like in the downtown area.
Yeah, they'd be up
Seem-
between Briggs and Broadway Street, east to west, out towards the factories, all the way over to the old hospital.
I'm sure, yeah, yep. I'm not 100% sure on that location, but yeah.
That's the only place I know of that has big
Usually,
transmission.
they're a taller structure, and then we have our 3 conductors, wires, and then usually Alliant has their conductors and wires on the same pole. Great questions, though. We have a headquarters here in Cedar Rapids, and we have other offices throughout Iowa and warehouses scattered throughout Iowa and southern Minnesota. The thing I always like to point out here, because there gets to be a little bit of confusion, is that we don't own any generation. We are basically the in-between. We are transmitting the power from one location to the other. So it's being generated at another location. We're sending it long distances, and then we're bringing it to communities like Fairfield. We bring it into the substation south of Subway, and then Alliant Energy distributes it through to homes and businesses. So I think there's always a good point that there's 3 parts. There's the generating, and then there's the long distance transferring, and then there's the distribution companies like Alliant. So after we purchased the system from Alliant, all the city franchises were partially assigned to ITC. Alliant recently renewed their city franchise with the city, which terminates our franchise that we had with the city, which brings us to this discussion here. The other goal here is to establish and forming a long-term partnership with the city. And I had a chance to meet with the franchise committee and really appreciated the interaction, having that discussion. And the goal is to be transparent and not have any surprises with this. We want to be a long-term partner with the city. So for tonight, we're asking the city to consider a 25-year franchise. Does anybody have any questions?
Okay, if there's no questions, I will close the public hearing, and we'll move on to the first reading of the ordinance. establishing a franchise agreement with ITC Midwest LLC.
I'd make the motion that we move the ordinance establishing a franchise agreement with ITC from the first to the second reading.
Is there a second? Second by Esty. Any questions?
Yes, I'd ask if the Environmental and Franchise Committee could give us a little bit of just background on this proposed ordinance, why we ought to support it or not ought to support it.
Well, if we have a franchise agreement with ITC, then we have certain leverage with them if we have conflict with lines or movement or workers coming into town and setting up someplace to work. That's my understanding from Melanie.
Yep. That's a good point, and there's a great example.
Otherwise, we don't have any protection, and neither do they.
Yeah,
So,
can you give an example? Like, yeah.
Yeah,
why don't you
absolutely.
Explain that a
There's a-
little bit so it's more clear.
There's a great example. So the project, the roundabout project is just south of Fairfield on Highway 1. So we had a structure that was on the corner, and we had to move that structure. And by having this franchise in place, holds the city harmless from the cost of moving that structure. So that becomes our expense because we're using the public right-of-way to place the structure in.
And 25 years is the appropriate time period.
pretty standard for most of our franchise agreements, are pretty long.
I believe that's the agreement that we have with Alliant too.
All right. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Any other questions?
What would be an instance where you would need to use eminent domain as far as your role in providing energy to town? Alliant Energy, sometimes they'll come up with something where they're in a bind in a new providing of service or something like that, but what would you need eminent domain for?
Let's just give the example, if we're rebuilding an existing line and we have 99% of the landowners along that path that are willing to allow us, or it's in the public right of way, so there's kind of a gray area of being able to place a structure. The idea is that is the last resort to go down that path. Nobody wins in that application. But it's the final and last resort if we do have to go down that path, that we have that actually as an option.
Yeah, you kind of said what I was thinking as far as you're already in a public right-of-way. Generally, each time that your lines are out there, I just didn't know why you'd need it if the public could already access it through the general code 6B procedures. I mean, the city does it all the time, but, you know, if there's, are you anticipating something might come up as far as rebuilds or something like that, you need more than the public right-of-way?
The only thing I could anticipate is, but there's nothing on the 5-year plan of rebuilding anything within the community. But when we're replacing structures for maintenance, or if there's a storm that comes through, the ability to be able to put the pole right back in the same location or nearby, this gives us that ability to do that. The goal is to keep it close to where it actually is right now, rebuild
Right.
it. But there might be a time where we want to move it into the public. The alleys is what comes to mind, is where I'm kind of,
Yeah.
alleys tend to be narrow and not necessarily the public right away.
So you might need to move it on a piece of personal or private property in an
Yeah.
alleyway, for example,
Yeah,
because you have no other choice.
yep.
Great. Okay, so we do have a first and second on the floor. Any other questions? If not, please call the roll.
Flournoy,
Yes.
Esti,
Yes.
Rasmussen,
Yes.
Ham,
Yes.
Gandy,
Yes.
Toohill.
Yes.
Thank you, Scott.
Thank you very
Appreciate it.
much, appreciate it.
Okay, next is ordinance 1225. This is the second reading, consideration of ordinance naming the street Chautauqua Drive. I will quickly open a public hearing. Does anybody want to speak to that? Seeing none, I'll close the public hearing. And council, you want to move this to the third reading?
Move to third reading.
Second.
Moved by Gandy, second by Toohill. Any discussion? Now please call the roll.
Gandy?
Yes.
Toohill?
Yes.
Esti?
Yes.
Ham?
Yes.
Rasmussen?
Yes.
Flournoy?
Yes.
Okay, under the mayor's report, I just have one thing, and that is, I wanted to recognize two of formerly retired police officers who have passed on in the last couple months, J. Roy Myers and Terry Patton. And, you know, they served the city of Fairfield for many years as police officers. And we thank them for their service and their families. We hope they had a good retirement, and we wish to give our condolences to the families. With that, city attorney report.
Where to begin? We've got a meeting in the morning, I believe, on the 2080 ambulance questions. I'm pretty sure, Tom. Anyway, what
There is.
Mr. Dimmock's talking about today, I think we're going to be talking some more about transitioning. I will also say that I've had some conversations with the county attorney about possibly putting another issue in front of the court by a report to be filed after the 4th of July about our issue over them no longer doing transfers, and everybody on our side being completely compliant by having covered the $10,000 a month added agreements reached at mediation, but that money's just sitting there, and we're going to try to see if the court will give us some direction on the transfer situation. Hopefully, the whole package will come together in a way that we get this resolved so that September really is transition month and not just a month when we're doing discovery for a trial, part of which is scheduled for December. So I think the goal of everybody on our end and all three of the entities in the 28E is hopefully we could get this thing resolved and transition into October 1st without the litigation hanging over. You agree with that, don't you, Tom?
Yes.
Other than that, we had something last week that is just a continuing saga. We had a kind of a heated argument up in magistrate court from a group of sovereign citizens. One of our sovereigns that refused to get a building permit for a deck showed up with 8 of her friends and wanted to serve about 50 pages of nonsense in court and make it part of the record. And we just said enough. There isn't a single thing there that's relevant to this case about a building permit. And anyway, the judge agreed with us. I knew it wasn't over. Today I got served with 3 sets of envelopes of papers with probably what they were going to serve in court. But anyway, the saga goes on. They just keep serving people. I know Becca gets some every month just to make her day. And it's all nonsense. I mean, they cut squibs out of notary seal stamps and forms, and they turn it into something that's supposed to look like a pleading or a claim. And it happens with different people's signatures notarized, and the more it's done, the more official it's supposed to look. And it's an abusive process. It's a simulated process. It's probably a fraud under our theft code as far as a false claim. But right now, the conversation I'm having is with the county attorney about whether it deserves a bigger investigation. We used to have some stuff in our city code, but the legislature took it away from us about 25 years ago as far as things that we could call and prosecute as misdemeanors. I think that would stop some people, but I don't think these folks are going to stop until they've papered everybody. So probably if you get served, the usual people that get served are the mayor and the clerk, and sometimes me. So in the meantime, I'm keeping track. I think it's going to be something that will eventually probably have the right words in it so that it truly fits what's wrong in the state code. But then I don't have the authority to go forward with it at that point. If it's truly a false claim under the theft statute, that's a part of 714 of the Iowa Code, we'll probably see what the county attorney thinks. But enough said. Anyway, that's what I'll say for tonight, okay?
Well, some of these people should be aware that in Colorado a few years ago or recently, a number of people went to jail for quite some time for interfering with official acts and creating harassing situations and
Right.
interfering with people doing their duty, you know. So the public should be aware of that.
Yeah, the legislature just passed a statute this spring that makes doing this thing in a way that is known to be false by filing through the Secretary of State's office, different degrees of misdemeanors, aggravated, serious, simple. And what happens there is some of the cleverness of this gets passed on by filing documents up there that are part of the Uniform Commercial Code. And they have easy to file online forms that you can do this with. You can imagine the clutter if somebody's got probably a property improvement loan at the bank or something like that, and maybe it's for an air conditioning unit and some other things that are fixtures rather than real estate. They end up in the UCC office at the Secretary of State's office, only this other stuff comes in then that really is just as much nonsense. And it clouds that asset filing up there that is a security agreement from being enforceable. The legislator wanted to prevent that. I think they'll take another look at this again and again as these kinds of stunts keep happening. But you're right, Doug. You're right.
Okay, thank you. Committee and board reports, personnel. Judy?
Yes, tonight we met first with John Morrissey about the intern to assistant position and just speaking about this letter of understanding that has been drawn up that we're recommending to the council to further. The main portion of that would be in the early stages of this agreement would be the city agreeing to additionally pay up to $2,250 per month during this training period of the intern.
Right, and I'll bring back a proposal as far as an assistant position after we've been through the summer interning. And other than that,
Yes.
I had to leave before you got done with your recommending ideas, but I think the other part of it's just about me. So you won't burn my ears if you say more.
And just for the council members that weren't at the meeting, we clarified, as you see the letter of understanding, that the first portion under this is just speaking about the intern and what she would be doing with John for the city. The second portion, under professional services and on, is what happens when things need to go to district court as opposed to magistrate court. And that's a whole separate billing situation. So just making you aware of that as you're reading through. Anything else in that either of you need to?
I don't think it's on their agenda until
Correct,
July.
it'll be on the agenda for the next meeting.
Right, for the next
Yeah,
meeting.
okay.
And then the second thing we're looking at is still the, excuse me, my mind just went.
Vacation policy.
Vacation and
Yes, vacation policy.
Maybe that's where your
And,
mind went.
Pardon?
Maybe that's where your mind went.
I really do need one. As we found where we need to go, looking at it and forming the wording, and so we will also be bringing that for all of you to see and hear as we get it formed. And that would be looking at what that looks like over a 1 to 2 year period if we would actually be doing payouts. And that way we'd have a better definition of when that would even be described and how it would be handled from there. So,
Great,
thank you.
Property committee?
Thank you, Mayor. The property committee met this evening we began our meeting at 6 p.m. And as a discussion, we became a quorum at 6:30 this evening. Present were our Melanie Carlson, our city administrator, Weston McKee, our code compliance officer, the mayor, John Morrissey, our city attorney, and property committee member Elizabeth Esty, and myself, Paul Gandy. We had 2 items to be discussed this evening, and we really have no ask of the council, but we have notices. We want to make sure that we are given. First item for discussion this evening was a property maintenance code. We have a property maintenance code in place, the International Property Maintenance Code, which is applied in our city to rental properties only. There was a discussion and a suggestion that this property maintenance code be slightly amended and expanded to include all other buildings in Fairfield, not with mandatory property inspections, but with inspections as needed if requested by an entity, including perhaps even perhaps a citizen. So there was a discussion about perhaps amending and expanding our property maintenance code. At this point, we are asking city staff to continue working on that a proposed amendment, bring it back to property committee for review and discussion at a later meeting. And if in our property committees deems it something that we ought to bring to full council for consideration, we will do so, but there's nothing we ask of the council this evening. The second item we discussed was Iowa Code Chapter 657A, which has to do with abandoned or unsafe buildings or abatement by rehabilitation. As you know, with our Housing Task Force initiative, the city has been moving ahead with addressing the housing shortage in Fairfield and also addressing the situation where we have a number of homes or properties that are substandard. So we have an Iowa Code chapter which addresses this concern, Iowa Code 657A, which we believe applies to all properties in the state of Iowa, but the discussion this evening was involved perhaps adding to our city code, incorporating this chapter into our city code to make it a more localized enforcement, or allow for more localized enforcement, or just more localized notice of the enforcement of the code. So that was a discussion we had at some length this evening, led by Mr. McKee, our code compliance officer. There was no action that we are asking. There's no action we're asking of the council other than we are going to continue the discussion. Mr. McKee and Ms. Carlson are going to propose or provide, I should say, additional information to the property committee to review how this 657A would be incorporated and how it would be implemented in the city. And at a later property committee meeting, we'll review those proposals, that information to provide, and perhaps come to the city council with an ask. But right now, it's noticed that with regard to these 2 issues, property maintenance code and the Iowa Code 657, there's further work to be done by our staff, further review by our property committee, and perhaps we'll come back to the council with an ask for action by the city.
Thank you.
That's it.
Administrator and department reports, city administrator report.
So I've spent the last several weeks touring the city by car and by foot. So far, I've visited the water treatment plant, the wastewater treatment plant, the Fairfield Library, police department, and fire department. They took their time. I got to know some of the employees. I'd like to eventually get to know them all. It does take some time having conversations. I learned a lot, and I encourage anybody that has not seen these departments, they should take a tour. I actually learned a few things. The wastewater treatment plant was actually, I want to say, the most interesting because of the size of it and the fact that, the amount of wastewater that we can treat and the fact that we have the ability to grow in an exponential manner up to 4 or 5 times. I was extremely impressed. The professionalism that our staff has. I've got to understand why we really need a new fire station and playing Tetris and getting things in there and going on patrol with the fire chiefs. The police chief, I really enjoyed that, and I've got a lot more to learn about our city, and I will continue to do that. This weekend I got to go to the fair and got to talk to a few people. I walked downtown and walked every single street, and some people knew me, some people didn't, but they probably thought it was, you know, a new guy running around town. So anyway, I've been looking at the budget, this year's and next year's, and I'm working on having conversations with department heads, and we'll actually have a deeper conversation. I'd like to see some improvements on how maybe we do things. I'm not here to change things. I'm here to make things a little more efficient, a little more transparent, a little better. Everybody seems receptive. I'd like to go to the subject matter experts and talk to the department heads and have them come to you versus, you know, just me or however that process is done. I hate to make changes to a process that I'm not familiar with yet, but I'm working on it. I have been in communication with Jennifer Moville, the summer inquiry for the Iowa codification of our ordinances, and I've communicated the remarks from the attorney back and forth. She said that she would get back to me this week and talk about next steps. So I will stay on that front until that job is done. I think they started to work on this in 2017, and we won't stop. I find that there's a need for grants. We continue to look at that, and I've got some of the department heads also helping me look through and talking about maybe some of these grants might be good for the fire station and some other infrastructure that we have. I think it's really important, and I'll have discussions later with Melanie to talk about some other initiatives that have been brought to me from the citizens. Had to deal with quite a few, well, I shouldn't say quite a few citizen complaints, and we addressed every single one. I actually met some people in their driveways. We had some people come up front, and I can tell you that the performance and the professionalism and the kindness of our staff that is up front is amazing. No matter what anybody may say, everyone kept their composure, and I'm very proud of them. I came in a little bit later and had some discussions, but they value customer service, and I really appreciate that. And but we are going to probably add some securities up front. I want to make sure that anything that occurs in anything that we do can be verified. But I can tell you that I witnessed the professionalism, and I'm extremely impressed. So I hope they hear me, and I will encourage that we continue to maintain that professionalism. I did review the audit. I believe that's been passed out. Yes. And we're looking at those exceptions, and we've addressed those. We are addressing those. We'll get controls in place. We will continue to look into reducing our exceptions and making sure that we increase anything that we can improve on to make sure that we're efficient and that we're transparent and that we have all the controls in place that I would say limit our exposure. And we'll go over that at a later date. And
July 24th, they're going to come present.
okay.
That was my question. They're gonna be here in
Yes.
person?
Yeah.
Good.
So
The auditors.
So the last thing that I need to discuss very quickly, because I want to move forward, and we currently got an email from Mary Beth Sprouse from the Iowa Department of Transportation in regards to an excise tax on electric fuel stations. And after considering this, that excise tax is 0.026 cents. We currently pay 30 cents a kilowatt at 32.6 a kilowatt hour. But after we were talking about amending the ordinance to increase those fees, we are thinking that as prices increase, that it might be a good idea that we put a mechanism in the ordinance to just allow those fees to increase as the electric technology becomes a part of our culture. It could very well be a revenue stream and could go back into the maintenance of these electric charging stations. The one thing that we had to do that I failed to mention is Rebecca applied for an electric fuel distributor license.
Yes.
Is that what that is?
Yes. So we can pay our tax.
So that we can
Our
remit
excise
those
tax.
taxes. Yes. So I would recommend that maybe this goes to the Ways and Means, that we can research this and get some guidance, because if we have to, if the Department of Revenue decides that they want to increase their fees, or if we decide that we need to increase our fees, that we're going to be coming back and amending that ordinance over and over and over again. So I'd like to have a little more closer look at maybe we have some sort of an arm or that allows us to maybe increase those fees. We're not out to, make a steady buck off, the people charging their cars, but we definitely would always like to consider making enough revenue that we can at least maintain the infrastructure that we have.
Great, thanks. So, do you want them to look at that right away?
Wait, I can provide them the information
Okay,
next week, or this week.
yeah. So Doug, you want to take that up with
Yeah.
your next, put it on your agenda for your next meeting? Okay,
Probably should have a motion.
do you want a motion?
Probably should have a motion.
Okay, well then,
Refer it to committee.
okay, then make a
I'll make that
motion.
motion.
Okay, is there a second?
Second.
Second by Cahill. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign. Okay, it's referred to Ways and Means. Project updates, Melanie?
Yeah. So other than, the big projects and keeping them moving, working on closing out a couple projects. So Morgan Street, the 2022 resurfacing, the Highway 1 water main project are all ones that are finished. We need to do some punch lists and some walkthroughs in order to get those closed out and in front of the council for completion. As we discussed at the last council meeting, the bids for Chautauqua and Waterworks were high. I did not have an opportunity in the last 2 weeks in order to finalize the value engineering on that project, but we did have a good discussion with the contractor and have some great ideas. We just need to fine tune that before we can present a final budget to the council. Then on the fire station, so the demolition is complete. They are working on the compaction and all of those items. But as Doug mentioned, that we've got some grants that we need to apply, and there's discussions. We need to make sure that we're moving forward with the right project, with the right funds, and we just, again, haven't had a lot of time to sit down with the architect yet. So those will be some things that are going to be happening in the next month, is getting those two projects moving forward again. There was a pre-construction meeting today for the Lamson Woods Natural Playscape. This is being funded through private citizens' donations, but it is going through the city for because it is on city property and for liability and all of those items. So we will have the payments to partner construction coming in the claims, and then it'll be reimbursed through the foundation. So yeah, work is starting out there. Actually started last week, and then we fine-tuned some of the details of construction today. In the planning and zoning office, has been pretty busy getting up and going again, so to speak. The rentals had been postponed in this interim period, and we're back to full staff in the front office. And so we are looking at scheduling rentals again. There have been a few rentals over the last couple of months, which have allowed the fire department to use our new forms And so we've made some changes to help them with that, and we think that we're ready to go forward with more regular rentals and get back on schedule with those. On the fence ordinance, there were a lot of rumors and discussions regarding that, but I think that we have some good information out to the public on that. Weston and I both received a lot of questions, and so we've been able to get information out to people. So at the end of my report, and we have copies here at City Hall, anyone can request them. So we do have these cheat sheets for several different things, such as accessory buildings, but we also have one related to fences. It shows where the front yard is, where the rear yard is, what the setbacks are. These are generic scenarios, but then what we've added is kind of a one-page guide related to materials, the type of information that we are going to be wanting on the building permit applications now, since we do have code related to the materials. We're encouraging people to either fill this out with their application or turn in, if they've already bought the materials, maybe they turn in the installation guide, or even if they went to Menards and they have the brochure that's showing the product, something that gives us a basic idea of what they're installing is what we've been asking for. So we've been answering a lot of questions, but I think we're kind of finally on some solid ground with majority of the community regarding the new ordinance. So we do have those available for anyone. Any questions on the project update? Okay.
Melanie, can I have a quick question
Yeah.
regarding all the fencing
Yeah.
and setbacks, et cetera? Did we get that resolved with that one owner on Iowa Avenue? That had the shed
Right.
in the right of way, and then there was the fence issue and et cetera, et cetera.
Did not put the Board of Adjustment minutes on the agenda, did we? Nope. So they went to Board of Adjustment and they were denied a variance for a front yard building. So that property owner then will be coming back to council requesting funds or compensation or something in order to move the fence or move the shed to the backyard. And this is the red shed on
Yeah.
Iowa Avenue.
Okay, great, thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks for that update.
Okay. And
Did
go ahead.
they approve moving it outside the back
No,
yard fence? It has to go inside the fence?
correct.
Okay.
I'm gonna rearrange the agenda since I'm already up here.
Yep.
And go
Okay.
to the Parklet variation. So this is I think I have it correct in the subject and wrong in my description. So for the old Armory building on Broadway, the developer for there has submitted an application for the dining platforms or the parklets that go in the parking spaces. And this is the first request we've had, so we got out the code and we were reading it. The parklets are in Chapter 9 of our code, and Board of Adjustment governs Chapter 20. So you guys are the governing body as far as issuing any variances to Chapter 9. And in working with the developer, we're okay on most of the requirements. There are a few things that the application does not meet, which I'd like to discuss with you guys. The first item is item 5 of the section, saying a restaurant may utilize no more than 2 public parking spaces within the dining platform. And then that paragraph goes on to say some other things. In this case, the developer wishes to use the no parking triangle between the crosswalk and the adjacent diagonal parking spaces. That given that the intersection of Broadway and B is a 4-way stop, I think them utilizing this, as long as they maintain drainage, that I don't see a problem in it. But again, that's using more than 2 parking spaces, so I would need council's approval to allow them to do that. Then when I go to paragraph 6, again, it says the dimension of the dining platform shall not exceed 13 feet in width. By utilizing the no parking triangle, the platform would have a width closer to 20 feet. That does still allow 3 feet on either side from the crosswalk and the adjacent parking space. So there's still room just by utilizing that triangle. It allows it to be a lot larger than what just utilizing 2 spaces would be. And then finally, in paragraph 14, the code says dining platforms shall not be placed in parking spaces at the corners of intersections or next to crosswalks, except where planting nodes are located between the parking spaces and the intersections or crosswalks. I was not involved when this was written, so I'm not 100% sure of the purpose of this paragraph. I'm guessing that it's a blanket paragraph to help make sure that there's appropriate sight distances at all of our intersections. However, in this particular instance, it is a 4-way stop, which although we still want to maintain as much sight distance as possible, the sight triangle is not as important at a 4-way intersection. So I would actually rather have the parklet all the way up to or as close to the crosswalk rather than having a blank or a parking space between the dining area and the crosswalk, because you're going to have somebody pulling out after people already passed the park. I think there's going to be too much confusion. Someone's not going to be expecting a car on the other side of that dining platform so close to the intersection. So I would actually rather see it close to the crosswalk, given that this is a 4-way intersection. If this was not a 4-way stop, I would feel different. So I'm prefacing with that. So my recommendation or request would be allow them to proceed with utilizing being closer to the crosswalk. I am indifferent, I guess, about using the triangle. I am excited that we finally have someone wanting to use a parklet, but I also understand that there is a little bit of precedence there by using that space. On the flip side, it's not being used for anything else. It's better than just a place to pile snow. I mean, I guess the parklets are removed, so there's really nothing being lost by them utilizing that space.
It's just a seasonal request.
What?
It's a seasonal request.
Yes, because they are required to be removed. So, or if you want to move this to a committee, or
I'm wondering about maybe going back to committee. This whole ordinance was designed, I'm thinking Michael Halley, and I'm thinking it was for the eastern intersection on the north side of the square on up towards the Civic Center primarily. Hardly took into consideration the area that's being looked at now, which the terrain is a little different.
yeah. And this section of the code does outline the areas that it is acceptable in, and which is basically the central business district. So this is in an acceptable area. But I would agree with you that probably when these rules were written, they were thinking more specifically around Central Park and around those businesses rather than the next blocks out.
Yeah, I'm recalling we had some kind of footprint sketching of out in front of the old Revelations
Okay.
as far as how this could work.
Right.
And it's a little bit different layout than where you're talking about. So.
Yeah, and I will say, one of the reasons they're looking into this is because of the accessible ramp that they're putting on the other corner, whereas some buildings may utilize more of the frontage, or on a corner they may utilize both sides for sidewalk dining. In this case, they're using their sidewalk for a ramp. And so they don't have some of the space that other buildings like Revelations might have.
Yeah, it seems to me like this should just be one more once over with the
Yep,
safety
yep.
committee.
Safety committee?
I make the motion to move it to safety committee.
Okay, is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay, thank you. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign.
All right, thank you.
Okay, that will go to Safety Committee. Thank you very much. Weston, Code Compliance Report.
Good evening, council. I'm gonna keep it short and sweet here. The main reason I wanted to talk to you tonight is about 504 South 6th Street, Kevin Franklin's house that we accepted from him as a nuisance property. Every day that sits, it costs us money. We have to mow it, or we have to maintain it. We want to make sure that there's not people moving into it or kids playing in it. So it causes some issues, just us owning a dilapidated property. So what I'd like to ask the council is for you to allow the Planning and Zoning Committee to develop a plan to sell the dilapidated house at 504 South 6th Street. We've had some interest in the property from investors and from the neighbors that want to buy the property. One option obviously is just a sealed bid process where we just examine straight monetary value that they're offering for the property. Another option is to take sealed bids on a developmental proposal and then to rank some things that we feel are important to us, whether it is the taxable income, the future use of the property, whether it's for a nonprofit, and meeting just our housing needs also. So if we can get housing stock out of it versus a garage. With that, I would ask that we can use the new housing task force maybe as somebody to help us evaluate that and maybe put some numbers on what they feel is important to those things. We would also have a minimum dollar amount that we would request as the bids came in to cover costs from legal services and my time and any other costs that we have involved in it. When we do this, we'll be able to set deadlines for it also. And with that, we can write up a contract where if they do not meet those deadlines, that they'd have to come to council and ask for an extension. If you didn't want to give an extension, we would be able to take the property back at that time. And we can also set standards as far as building codes and stuff like that we expect to be done with it. So I guess my ask is that you allow us to move forward with that and work with those, the Housing Task Force and probably Josh Larrabee on setting up a plan to get rid of it, hopefully soon.
So
I was wondering if it shouldn't go to property committee, but we we asked some of those people that in the appropriate areas, because we do have committees within the Housing Task Force,
Right.
and that we invite them to come to the property committee meeting, but you lead it since you're co-chair, or you're chair of the Housing Task Force and chair of property. So I'm just throwing that out there as kind of a joint session. If you will.
That makes sense to me as well. I just want to, if I can ask you, that makes sense to me as well, Mayor. You were first proposing that the Planning and Zoning Committee develop a plan of sale?
No, the
Then you-
office.
Go ahead.
Melanie and I would come up with a plan. I have some plans outlined from some other cities
Yeah.
that we could base it off of.
So-
and
Go ahead.
come to you with a proposal. I didn't know it had to go to committee, but if that has to be, but come to you with the finalized proposal with backing from those committee, or from the task force, and say, this is what we want to do. If you didn't like the proposal, then you could always shoot it down, or we could have a plan B also.
Right. Since we are dealing with city property,
Yeah.
I think it is appropriate that it be referred to the property committee.
Okay.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
But let's invite some task force members to
Absolutely.
come in.
I'll
Absolutely.
make that motion.
Okay?
Second.
So,
But should we put a caveat that, we want a livable home out of this. We don't want it to turn into a garage. So could we put a qualification on it that it cannot just be purchased by a neighbor who wants more property, sitting empty, a lot there, but with the idea that a house would be built there to replace the one that's existing.
Is that our, I think that's probably something appropriately to be considered by the property committee, with that as a suggestion.
Well, I'm wondering if we
Motion.
should make it part of the motion and make it a requirement that that's the way we want this to come out.
My concern is that if we do make that a requirement, that we might not get somebody that wants to buy it. I mean, I'm hoping that an investor will want to buy it and tear it down and build something there. I think the house is at a point where it needs to be torn down. It's not a salvageable structure. So there's quite a bit of cost involved in that, that an investor might not want to put in. So in my mind, getting rid of the dilapidated structure and cleaning up that area is number one. Number two is if we can get a house in there, in my mind, but I would settle for not having the dilapidated property there. I mean, that's why I said the ranking system would work really well for it, and having some value to the different proposals. You know, if they're gonna put a house in there, we'd rank that very high because we want housing. But if we got absolutely nothing else, at least we would have somebody that wanted to tear down the property and make the neighborhood better.
So I make the motion just to refer to property committee and let them come back with a recommendation or a list of recommendations.
Okay.
I'll
And
second
and we
that.
have Two
Yes.
Hill as a
Yeah.
second. Okay, so
I'll second.
any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign. Great. We'll get some of those other people involved too, from the task force. Okay, that is it for our agenda. I'll take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Moved by Two Hill,
Second.
second by Flournoy. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign. Meeting adjourned. Thank you, council.